Welcome to this week's Burson Garage HPHQ podcast. It's also brought to you by the world's wildest car festival, SUMMERNATS. That's right, mate. I'm here with my mate Webby, and haven't we got someone special on tonight?
We have, J-Benz. We got Jeff Haggarty, who was one of the head designers, one of the lead designers at Holden for many, many years. And I've been thinking about having him on for quite a while. I just had the right time. And he will give us a great insight into Holden, design, what went on, and I guess the demise of the whole thing. So I'm really looking forward to the chat with Jeff.
And I've never been happier to see you there with a Holden logo behind your webs.
Well, see, I've got to put that up because I've just got the book up for Christmas of what's called The Final Chapter, and it's the whole story of Holden, and there's 3 books. It's just the most awesome recollection of Holden. Yeah. And
because I know you're a bit of a Ford guy, but
I am.
You're an Australian car guy, and you love it all. It's like me. I love Holden's. It's probably my favourite brand, but I love Ford's. Sounds a bit crazy, but just as much.
No.
I really do.
No, it is. It's just been such a great industry, and look, I'm sure Jeff is just going to give us a great insight to the whole Australian car industry in general, because he's a bit of a Ford guy. He might even tell us about a Mustang he's building.
Yeah, and apparently it's going to be really, really cool. So. And he's going to go into detail a lot about, the processes behind Holden behind the scenes and how it all worked and stuff like that. So, all right, don't forget that Rocky Nats, if you haven't got your tickets for Rocky Nats, make sure you get them because that event is going to be gone. We say this every time. And
no, it is. And it is because I actually know that I think they'll be cut off next week because we've actually, when I looked there, there was 1,300 in. We are pretty full. We've got got enough unveilers, we've got enough elite cars, and then all the other sections are full. And street drags, show and shine, bike show, drifting.
It's going to be mad.
Unreal.
I don't even mean to say mad then. It's going to be mad. It's actually going to be mad, Rocky Nats. I cannot wait for that. Absolutely. RockyNats.com.au. If you get confused, you can go to SUMMERNATS.com.au and you'll find your way there. We want to see you at Rocky Nats. We're all going. It's going to be great. So, not much else to talk about now. We want to get on with this episode because it's a very special one. We'll be back after this.
Burson Auto Parts are the best people in the business with over 190 stores Australia-wide and over 850 delivery vehicles to get the parts you need to you. You can expect expert service and advice from the most experienced parts people in the game. There's a $70,000 big brand giveaway, and all you need to do is join free at bursongarage.com.au.
With Haltech, you unlock the power. With everything from universal ECU kits, plug and play kits, to dashers, gauges, merchandise, and more. Have a look at this. Oh my gosh. Have a look at that. Buttons. Nice. Haltech.com. That's it. .com.
All right. How lucky are we? We got Jeff Haggarty, one of the head designers from Holden over many years. So welcome, Jeff.
G'day, Owen. How are you?
G'day, Jeff.
G'day, Josh. How are you? Nice to be invited on.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
Mate, you've been in the back of my mind for quite a few months, so just the timing was right.
I didn't make you feel sick or anything.
No, mate, the timing was right. So we'll get into the whole thing with Holden, but give us a little bit of how you actually become a car guy, or what's your background?
Well, I was born with that gene that I think you two guys probably have, the car gene, which is probably more like an illness than a gene. It's cost me a lot of money. I was
going to say it's an expensive gene.
Yeah, damn straight. But so I always wanted to work in cars and something to do with either designing or engineering. I wasn't smart enough to be an engineer, but I could draw pretty well. And so I found out about the profession of industrial design, which is styling the exterior bodies. And I thought, gee, that's a bit of me. So I did design school straight out of high school, a place which is now UTS in Sydney. I'm from Sydney.
Yep.
And then I did a whole lot of product design for a long while, but I always wanted to be in the car industry. And so I tried and tried and tried. I was, sort of 6 months or so of ringing them up, sending folios down to Ford and Holden and also to Toyota back in those days, although Toyota was pretty small. And in the end, in 1989, so there was about 2 or 3 years of trying, I finally got a call from Phil Smoot, said, come down, we'd like to offer you a job. So I worked there for 2 years as a contractor, and in that time, the day I walked in, the smell of the clay, the fact that everybody's just switched on and talking about cars and we're all thinking about what we're going to do, designing surfaces, all this sort of stuff, I just knew that was it. That was what I had to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And how old were you then?
I was 27.
Yeah, okay.
So I was a little bit older than some of the other guys because I hadn't gone straight from graduating into getting a job in the car industry. I'd sort of bummed around doing a lot of product design. Well, not bummed around, but I was doing product design. And I realised that wasn't really what my calling was. So I was at Holden's for the 2 years, 89, 90. They asked me if I wanted to go permanent. And I've learned now never to look a gift horse in the mouth. I was getting paid pretty well as a contractor, and it's around about twice the money you get as a permie. I said, oh, no, I'll stay as a contractor. And they went, yeah, all right. Yeah, okay. So as soon as there was a slight downturn, I got flicked.
Yeah.
And I realised that, if I hadn't have done that, life would have taken a totally different turn. It was interesting, though, because I was earning all that money, but I wasn't paying any tax on it. And that was part of the thing that I got.
Yeah.
I got into a big hole over, and I bought this car that I'll tell you about later. And so I ended up with no job, no money, no prospects, and a huge tax bill. And I went back to Sydney, and I was I started doing some illustration work for car magazines.
That's right. That's when I first met you. Yeah.
That's correct. And I think I did stuff for Fast Fours and Rotaries. Most of these titles are gone now. Fast Fours and Rotaries, Motor Magazine, Wheels, and, of course, Street Machine. And I started doing the expression session for Street Machine, and
that's right.
Got a lot of recognition out of that, and it was really good. And then I also did a thing where I put on every year up in Sydney at the beginning of Eastern Creeks, when it was built, they used to have a thing called the Triple Challenge.
Yep.
And the Triple Challenge was, as you may remember, it hasn't been on for about 20 years or so, but it was 3 different disciplines. It was drag racing, Australian superbikes, and what became VAT supercars, all at Eastern Creek on a Saturday. And it was just bloody fantastic.
It was mad, wasn't it? I loved it. Yeah.
Oh, and I came up with this idea of doing an exhibition there. And I said, I went to the track management. I said, how about, I think it was the Horsley Room back in those days. I said, could I do a thing? I showed them what I did, and they said, yeah, that'd be great. Come in. And I was going to try and sell these artworks. I did motorbikes. I did MotoGP. It might not have been called MotoGP back then. 500s. I did plenty of touring cars, lots of drag cars. Put all these things up on the wall. Didn't sell one. Got everyone coming along, and I had all the drivers coming up. I had all the team owners coming up. Oh, that's great stuff, mate. Yeah, see you later. But the good thing was that about maybe a month later, a guy named Rod Hunwick rang me up and said, I hear you do a draw. I hear you draw motorbikes. And I said, I have been known to. What do you want me to draw a bike for? He says, no, I want you to design one.
That's right. I forgot about this. Yeah, how good was that?
Yeah, it was a pretty big part of my life. And I used to go up to his house. He had a big mansion up in Dural, and I used to do it. We were doing tape drawings on the garage wall. It was all pretty hokey, but it was really cool. And he got a guy named Paul Hallam to be the engineering input. Paul Hallam was a second generation bike engineer. His father had worked for Repco Brabham, and it was all getting really good. And then Rod said to me, I think you better come work for me full time. So yeah. Cool. So I did that. That sort of project waxed and waned. Paul and Rod had a bit of a falling out. I ended up leaving because I got glandular fever, and I met my wife, or I got glandular fever. One of the two. And I got a job back down here in Melbourne.
Jeff, just for a minute there, what you didn't mention was that actually it went from design, they actually built a couple of those bikes.
Oh, yes.
And they actually raced them and everything. That was a really cool bike.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, it was raced, but that was part of the problem, you see. We put the cart a bit before the horse. I had a fair bit to do with the styling of the race bike, but I was sort of saying, hey, wait a minute, shouldn't we be trying to do road bikes here because that's how we're going to make money?
Mm.
And no, they said, we'll get lots of publicity from doing the race bike. Anyway, I left. I was working down in Melbourne. That project I thought had died, and I was working down in Melbourne for EDAG, and I through the magazine contact, Steve Nelly, who was the editor of Auto Action at the time, rang me up and said, can you design a trophy we're going to do a reader's survey for the best V8 supercar driver, like a reader's nominated best V8 supercar driver for the first V8 supercar thing in 1999. They had the big presentation down here at Crown, and so he said, I want to do a really big splash for Auto Action. Can you design the trophy? So I designed a V8 supercar, and I said, how are we going to make this? He said, we'll get Harrop Engineering to machine it up. They've got some pretty cool CNC stuff. I said, great, yeah, I'm happy to be involved with that. So I went up. He said, you should come up to Harrop's and meet Ronnie. And I said, yeah, okay. So I went up there and talking to Ron, and I bumped into a guy that I knew from the bike project. And I said, Simon, what are you doing here? He says, Jeff, what are you doing here? And I said, and he said, the bike project's back on. And Ronnie's standing next to him and he said, hey, I thought all this was top secret.
I designed it, mate.
And he said, he's the designer. He pointed at me. And Ron's going, what? And I said, what's happening? He said, the bike project's back on. Harrop's now the new engineering input. I'll give Rod a call. And next thing you know, I'd moved back to Sydney and I was working on that for another 18 months.
Wow.
And that project we built 4 prototypes. We built some static models. We had a whole lot. I think I got you involved in trying to get the painting.
We did.
Yeah. And it was really about to break really wide open. We took the bike to the US and showed it at a big trade show there, and the Yanks loved it. That's where our main market was going to be. It was going to be really exciting. And it was a big cruiser this time. It's called the Phantom 1500. I even worked on the patterns for the old school timber patterns for the engines, because the engine was all bespoke. Mm. Not that I was a pattern maker, but I would do anything if they asked me to. They said, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And so we're doing 80, 100-hour weeks, all of us. So it was a big job. Anyway, then I think 9/11 happened, and suddenly all the investment dried up, and suddenly I was out of a job again with two new babies, not looking too healthy, and out of the blue, well, sort of out of the blue, I had always kept in contact with them, but Simcoe rang me up from Holden's and said, do you want to come back and work here? And
that was about the...
Thank you, God.
That was about the time of the Monaro, wasn't it?
Well, I was brought in to work on the SSX show car, and as soon as I got there, I must have rubbed Max, who was the designer of the VY. I must have rubbed him up the wrong way, because they took it off me straight away. And they said, I said, well, what do you want me to do? And they said, and then suddenly the GTO happened. And they said, and they flicked the GTO to me. And so I did the front end design, a lot of the interior changes for the GTO, and then the next model GTO, and then the VZ Monaro. Because the original V2 Monaro had been out for a year, I think, 98. Yeah, so it was really hot. It was really good. And so it was like, wow, what a great job to come back and do a muscle car, because I'm a muscle car guy. Exactly. I'm absolutely bona fide an American muscle car guy. Australian muscle cars too. Yeah. But that's the sort of cars I really love. And so to work on something like the GTO, for me, was just like, I couldn't have had a better job.
So just on that, Jeff, just so people have a bit more of an understanding, people not necessarily design the whole car, you might do different sections of it, is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was involved with, they're basically facelifts for the GTO. So we were taking the V2 Monaro, I put a new I put those hood scoops on it, designed that new front end for it, wheels, some interior changes, a lot of the graphic stuff. And then with the VZ Monaro, we did change the front end on that as well. That was the second generation Australian car, Monaro. I didn't do, the original car was basically Mike Simcoe and Peter Hughes and Richard Filazzo, both. Probably, actually, Richard had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
He gets sort of downplayed a bit, but Richard did a lot on that. He did a lot of everything at Holden, because he's a very clever guy.
Yeah. And for the people that don't know, we'll touch on it later. He was the main designer with Effigy, wasn't he, Richard?
Oh, absolutely. I'll get to that. That's the thing. That my time at Holden's was just always pleasurable. I was doing great stuff. So I went from that to I did another little show car called the SST, which is like a step-side version of a VZ Ute.
That's right.
Then I did the Cross X, the four-wheel drive Ute that we did, the four-seater. Cross X it was called, Cross 8.
Yep.
I did the Adventurers, and then I did the Camaro. So then I was working on the Camaro. I wasn't the lead designer.
For the US.
For the US. So what happened was Hannenberger had been sprouting our Zeta platform. Everyone had been saying how good it was. The US had the idea, of Simcoe was working in the US at that stage, and he had gotten people to do sketches, and they did a show car of the next Camaro, and a guy named Sang-Up Lee, who was a Korean designer who worked in Detroit, did the sketch that got picked, and then they said, the best platform to put this on would be a Zeta platform, which was VE Commodore. Now, VE Commodore wasn't out at that stage, so we were building the 2010 Camaro off the Zeta platform, which wasn't out. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So I was like Sang-Up's right-hand man and just making sure all the details that we're trying to get right would be right. So headlamps, there was a lot of, because this is the one thing about working with General Motors is it's always cost constraints. And so that's always a bit of a bugbear. But anyway, it was a great job. And once again, working on another American muscle car, and probably the most iconic Chevrolet you can think of. So really cool.
So just on that, Jeff, so if you design just certain parts, say it was the tail lights or the front, did you actually design it, and then do you do a clay model of it and everything?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we had 2 full-size clays, or 3 when we did the convertible as well. So we were doing all sorts of things, proving out stuff. So the process is these days that you would do a whole lot of sketches on paper. It's usually on the computer these days.
Yeah.
We'd print it out, we'd get a theme selected, then we would give it to our digital sculptors who would get a rough shape in Alias, which is a program that gets all the surfaces looking pretty cool. Then we cut that clay, and then we would get our really good clay modelers to work with the designers. Both of us would be looking at things like, can you just make that a little bit flatter or a bit rounder or whatever? And we'd hand massage the car till it looked really good, redigitize it, then get all the lines really, really straight and perfect in CAD, and then that would be pretty much go to be signed off. That whole process probably takes 3 to 4 years. It's not like I say it happens that quickly. We did it with the motor. I did the clay modelling on the motorbike project back, and it was just me, and I did it all by hand. But it's only a small little thing. When you're doing great big surfaces like down the side of a car, and you want all the highlights to run, and you'd know about this when you're judging good show cars. It's all about how nice and straight the highlights are. And
absolutely,
that sort of stuff. And, of course, if something's brand new, it's got to be perfect. So there's a lot, and that's one of the things that Simcoe was always really good at Holden's. He had this magnificent eye for detail and getting things to look right from all different angles. You look at something and you say, oh, that's fantastic. And then he would walk 2 steps that way and say, yeah, but it looks a bit shit when you look at this thing. And you go, oh, right.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, you're right.
You're the boss too, so I better fix that. And so, it was always this thing of there's a lot of tuning of the surface to get it as good as we can. And we'd go into the detail. So when I say I'd do the headlights and tail lamps, so it's like the whole front end of the car, because that car had a nose cone.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
We had to do the whole, that was all in moulded in polypropylene. So we used to call it polywarpylene because it's such horrible stuff to make a body out.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was a real challenge to do that. And it was one of the first cars that we did with a complete nose cone. And I don't think General Motors want to do nose cones ever again, actually.
It owed too much. But one interesting thing there, which a lot of people here listening wouldn't know, is that so much of that Camaro was designed in Australia, come out of Australia.
Entirely. It was entirely. Like I said, Sang-Up, who was the designer, who was the lead designer, he was out here for 18 months working with us to make sure, because we were also the engineering hub for it. So all of Holden's engineering did all the engineering for it as well. So
That's unreal.
And then one of the things about it was that I was recently in the States, before COVID, I was in the States, and I got for just with the family. So I hired a Dodge Challenger in LA, a Camaro in Frisco, and then I was in Portland, so we had a Mustang in Portland. And I'm not saying this because I was an ex-GM employee. I was still a GM employee, but the Camaro was the most solid car. It was a convertible too.
Yeah.
And it was the most solid car.
Yeah.
Whereas the Challenger was a rattle trap and it was only 6,000 miles old.
Yeah.
It had a heap of poke. It went really well.
Yeah.
But, the Camaro was really nice and solid and felt really good, and I was proud of that. I thought the Australia did a really good job. And then the next one, the next one wasn't done by us, but it's really gratifying. And that's the other reason why I love the car industry is you do something, and so long as it doesn't get killed by the company, 3 to 4 years later, you see it driving down the road, and you can say, "Hey, I designed that."
I was going to say, then you see it in one of the world's biggest selling movies in Transformers. It's like the lead role, the car. Yeah. It must have been. You'd be sitting back in the movie theatre thinking,
absolutely, mate.
Oh my God.
Absolutely, and I worked on the design of those stripes too. I mean, there wasn't a lot of input because they said this is what we want, so I just executed it. But I mean, the bumblebee stripe was something that had to be done, and because that was an iconic stripe, right? So that was like what was on the 69 SS to begin with. So we just dragged it into the 21st century, so to speak. But
that's an absolute awesome story that people, I'm sure there would be very few people would know how much of that car was designed in Australia. And
well, we didn't make a secret of it.
No,
but I think you're right. I think people don't. There's always, what Australia's like, tall poppy syndrome.
Yeah.
And as soon as I finished that job, Richard came to me. He'd always been doing these sketches of an FJ hot rod and I think he might have told you this story too, Owen. Richard spent some time in the US and he worked with Larry Erickson.
Yes.
Because Larry used to be a Cadillac designer.
Yep.
And, of course, Larry did the Cadzilla for
ZZ Top. Yeah.
And
Richard loved that car. He always loved that car.
Oh, yeah. But he said, I could do that with an Australian bent. Now, I can remember him showing me pictures back when he first came back in 1990 when he first came back from – I'm not sure when it was. It was a fair while ago. It was like a good 10 years before Effigy was ever even started. He was doing sketches saying, how about I could do something where we stretch a FJ and do this. And I was always thinking, mate, that's great, but Holden's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, next thing you know, he's bought a Corvette. Well, he didn't buy the Corvette. We had this Corvette that was a pilot build car, and we used to, I think, chief engineer used to tool around in it for a while, and then they said, what are we going to do? We're going to crush it. And Richard just said, no, we'll have it over in design. I said, what are you going to do with it then? Next thing you know, the body's off it.
Effigy.
And that became the chassis for an Effigy, exactly right. And so I was his right-hand man on that one, probably because of my street machine contacts. So I got him in contact with Jeff Seddon and got him in contact with you. And we were always fiscally challenged, right? So we never had the dough to really just do this the way we wanted. So we had to sort of go cap in hand. It was a bit embarrassing having to go cap. We're the biggest car company in the world back in those days. Could you give us some paint, please, Owen?
Yeah, exactly. I remember all those meetings.
But once again, what a dream job. Probably the greatest show car ever to be designed in Australia, and possibly
the world.
One of the best looking ones in the world, no doubt.
Look, when it went to the States, it won that big award there, and
it won. It got invited to be. It wasn't invited to participate, but it got invited to go to the Autorama in Detroit to be in alongside the Riddler cars.
Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't not competing, of course, but alongside those cars.
Yeah,
that's the caliber of the thing. Yeah, so it was really awesome. Yeah, and it drove really well. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that if you think of any Holden guy will class that as it's the Halo product, right? The Effigy, it's such an amazing car that I think what I love about it is it keeps those classic design, but it somehow still looks modern.
Yeah. That was Richard's absolute. That was exactly what he wanted to do. He said, "I've got to keep those key things like the grill, and the badges, and a couple of things like the wheel design. So the wheels, even though they were 22 inches or something, they're massive. They were still a shape that looked like an original FJ hubcap. Yeah. And so he was wise to all that stuff, and the dash we did. So we did that dash that looked like an original FJ, but then it had all the whiz bang technology thrown at it, so that it just looked awesome. And the car drove him. I drove it a few times, and it was amazing how well it drove. And like we got we had all people help. Glenn Rallick, remember Glenn Rallick? He helped us with the airbags, and that was fantastic. So it was a great job. And we took that to SUMMERNATS, and that was a really big. Did. Yeah, we had a great time.
Motor X, we had a Motor X. Yes. Wherever that car went, people were just always around it, just 2 or 3 deep, and Richard just loved talking to him about it, didn't he?
He could talk. Richard's a pretty slick operator, and he can talk to anybody, and he's always got a good line of chat, but he knows his shit. He really knows what he's talking about, and that's really good.
He's not an executive that just sits up there in his tower. No, he's a doer, isn't he?
Exactly right.
So what's happened to all those show cars from Holden? Where are they all hanging out?
Okay, they've all been the collection, and there was over 60 cars, or around about 60 cars, and we were trying to get a home for all of them. And what's happened is they've been farmed out to various museums around the country. So things like Effigy, and I think the GDRX and the Hurricane. I mean, when I was at Holden's, we did a complete resto of the Hurricane too.
Yeah,
what a car that is. Yeah. What an amazing car that is.
Yeah.
And anyway, they went to the National Motor Museum, the one at Birdwood.
Oh, good.
Some cars have gone up to Echuca.
Yeah.
Some have gone to the Australian National Museum in Canberra. And I think 1 or 2 cars might have gone down to not Traralgon, Trafalgar, down in the southeast Gippsland.
Yeah.
So they're all still owned by GM. GM will not sell the cars. They can't be taken out of the country because they're seen as Australia's history. So there's also things like the first millionth car, the second millionth car, all those sort of cars as well that are part of the collection. The very last VF. No. Now, this is the thing. This is what I don't understand. You know how last
3
weeks ago, someone reckons he's got the very last VF. Well, I don't think so. There was another red one.
I like it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure we had the last VF, which we kept. It's up at it's over at Birdwood. So I don't know. I'm not.
He might have had the last one that was sold.
I think it fetched half a million bucks or something.
It did. That was 800,000, and the Ute. There was only 4 of that. That was over $1 million.
That was $1,050,000. Yeah. And I believe it's being raffled off. It's being. Wow. Yeah, I think I might have a go at that raffle.
So Jeff, something I want to ask you. So there are so many good people. You've talked about Mike Simcoe. You've talked about obviously you, Richard, all that. What are all you guys doing?
Well, I personally have retired. I was 59 when it all stopped, and I would have kept going for another 5 or 6 years easily. But an older guy like me is probably not so much of a chance to get a job. Richard's also sort of semi-retired, although he did this really cool electric
bike with Brian Tandy, yeah.
And he's now, it's so cool. Every time he rides it along the beach down here in Melbourne, he gets like a crowd of 20 people around it. And you stop at a cafe, and they'll go, "Where can I buy one?" And so. Who knows? He might be looking at something like that. He's got a few little irons in the fire, so
I'm sure he has.
Yeah, he's one of these guys that even if he's in semi-retirement, he'll be trying to fix up something and will do something. He's also got a little. It's a cool car, but it's not my sort of thing. He's got a Fiat 124 Sport Spider.
Yeah.
So he's got one of those. He's doing up. My other good mate, Peter Hughes, the picture behind me, I don't know if you can see it.
Yep.
He does a lot of V8 supercar liveries still. He used to do it a fair bit while he was at Holden's, but now he's doing that. Plus he's doing a whole lot of nice artwork prints of all through the history of Holden Motorsport. So he's doing that sort of stuff. Hughes Holden Motorsport Design. most of the guys a lot of the people who were doing the alias and the clay work have gone to Fords. So there's at least maybe 10 or 12 guys have gone up, and girls have gone up to Ford.
But there's nothing left at Holden down at Port Melbourne there?
It's gone. Yeah, totally. There's a few people gone to Toyota, and that's...
I was talking with at the time when the VF had just reached the Series 2, and a friend of mine, a car journo guy, and I was doing some car journo stuff at the time. I drove the VF SS Series 2, and that was a world-class car at the time. Like, that was like, even when the VF first came out, that was such a good car.
Well,
such a good car compared to the other stuff.
I know exactly what you're saying. I bought one. I like the summer. I had a fair bit to do with the last one, and every time I drive it puts a smile on my face. Look, but the thing is, the world's changing. This electric car thing, whether that's actually what will be the future, I don't know. But it's not so much just electric cars, it's the fact that people don't buy sedans anymore, and that was the only car we could make profitably here in Australia.
Well, I couldn't believe year before last, I was in the States, and Ford, their whole new range, no sedan.
No sedan, yeah.
Everything, I was just stunned. Absolutely stunned, yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I don't like driving issues. I hate being up high. I want a car that's as low as possible to the ground, as far as I'm concerned.
Mate, so we didn't touch on something there, so what about you? You mentioned everybody else. What are you doing?
Well, like I said, I'm retired, semi-retired.
No, you're not. I know you won't be.
Well, I'm working on my own projects, but one of them is my Mustang that I have had since I was first started at Holden's. I bought my dream car was always 67 Mustang Fastback, 67, 68. And it was interesting, when I got this job at Holden's, I suddenly had enough money. I raced out and I bought one, and I could have bought a genuine 390 GTA or the car I bought. And I bought the car I bought because
it's always the way.
Yeah.
Well, as it turns out, the car I bought, because the thing was, I wanted to modify it because I've never ever owned a stock standard car in my life. I have always potted the bejesus out of all my cars. Even this SS I drive now is, it's lowered, it's got an exhaust and all this sort of stuff, because I don't drive. If I own the car, it's not going to stay standard. That's all there is to it.
Yep.
And I thought, geez, a 390, I'd be silly to be cutting that up and doing things to it. So I bought this other thing, which was just a hairdresser's car, really. But it turned out to be totally rust-free. That was the only good thing about it.
Awesome.
Not a speck of rust in it. And I had this conversation with you a number of times.
Yes.
I used to do the expression session, as you know, and so I was all about, and I used to write the stuff in it. It was all about planning your project and all about how you can.
and I honk on about it all the time now.
Yeah. Well, that's the way you do it in the car industry. That's the way you do it when you're trying to be professional. Is you've got to do it as a plan. You've got to have a plan. You've got to have a budget. You've got to have a time frame. You've got to have all these things. You've got to get those ducks in a row. And partly because I never had the money because of that tax thing and all that, my plan went out the door. But not only did it go out the door, it went like into orbit. It went to another place altogether. Because here's an example. When I first bought the car, it was like it had a C4 in it, and I was always a manual gearbox guy. So I bought a top loader for it. But then a few years later, they're going on about new TKO 5-speed. So, I better get a TKO 5-speed. So I bought a TKO 5-speed. I ended up putting it out in another car. I still got the top loader, so anyway. And then I'm working for Holden's, and I'm driving around in 6-speed cars all the time. Thinking, why would I have a 5-speed? I've got to have a 6-speed. So I bought a T56. Now I've got a T56 with a G-Force dog box conversion. The gearbox is worth more than I paid for the entire car. So,
and you still haven't got the car finished.
And I still can't drive the bloody thing. But that shows how poorly planned the whole project is. And but it will. But the good thing is that now I have the time, and I'm lucky. That's one of the things about. I retired because I could. I was very, very lucky. I had, after my scare with the tax, I realised I had to really look after my family. So when the shit hit the fan at Holden's, I was very, very lucky in that I'd paid the house off. I had very good super. I had everything in a row, so that I was getting toward having a good budget for the car. So now I've got A, the time, and B, the money, and C, the inclination to finish the thing. And so it is going to be finished. Notwithstanding COVID, we just went into lockdown down here 2 hours ago, or in 3 hours or whatever, which slowed me down last year, something chronic. But like the car's it's got parallel 4-link put in it, it's mini tub, it's got adjustable roll centre, Watts linkage, it's got strut front end now, it's got new flat firewall, big trans tunnel for the gearbox, full cage, because the car's going to be road registered as an M-plate car, and which means I don't want a trailer queen. I don't want to have to drive it to events or a trailer to events. Sorry.
Yeah.
I want to be able to drive it to an event or even drive it to a show. I'll be happy to show the car, not for all its life because it's going to get stone chips. But the idea is that I want the thing to be a driving car. And so it's going to be M-plate registered. My engineer said, well, the easiest way to do that with all these modifications you've got is to actually get CAM's logbook. So it's actually going to be CAM's logbooked as a tarmac rally car.
Yeah, right.
So
you just better be careful what you say, because now I'm going to hold you to a date and I'm going to get you to either a Motorex or a SUMMERNATS, all right? So,
no, I need that kind of kick up. I need that kind of kick up the date, mate. I really do.
I'm going to be on your case after this.
No, please do it. Don't worry about that. He's kicking everybody constantly.
That's all right. But so it's like I had this plan to have it finished by my 60th birthday, which is this year, but COVID kind of stopped that. So I'm hoping it's going to be next
61st. Yep,
61st. Yep, July next year.
And we'll work on Motorex. We'll get around at Motorex, all right?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, mate, a comment. You made a couple of comments through that, but something I just wanted to say. I just think it's a really poor reflection of so many things that Australia doesn't have, a car industry in general, but just Holden in particular. It's such a. I guess I like all cars, but you think that Holden was just such a part of Australian fabric. It's really sad, isn't it? Yeah.
It's more than sad, but you're absolutely right. It's tragic is the word.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look, it's I guess it's a reflection of the fact that the whole company was never owned by Australians. It was always owned by overseas money. So when we did well, they didn't even care about us. They were saying, yeah, just keep the money coming in. When we started the cost of money, we were always under the microscope. What are you guys doing down there? You know, what's this? And we knew things were going really bad when they sold Opel, because we obviously stopped making any products here in Australia. I shouldn't call them products. I hate that. It's not products. They're cars, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
They stopped making cars in Australia, and then we were going to use the Opel vehicles, and we're saying, well, they're pretty good cars. I don't know if they're really going to do that well for us. But then suddenly they sold Opel. And we're all looking at each other going, what are we going to sell? This right-hand drive, we're about the only right-hand drive thing. And at that stage, we still had the Colorado truck, which was actually doing reasonably well for us. So I did a Colorado show truck too, which was really well received. And, we had great plans for it. I was working on new stuff for the next model Colorado right up until the day they made the announcement. So it's a fallacy for people to say, we always knew we were going to close. We did not know that.
No.
The mothership might have known that, but they didn't tell us. We were always expecting. We weren't quite. We could see things were going wrong. You didn't have to be a rocket scientist to work that out. But we still wanted to believe, and we still wanted to keep working on the product, and we were still trying to do things that were going to make the car better, make all our vehicles better. And so we were spending money working with suppliers, doing all this stuff right up until the Monday that it was announced, and just. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? You don't have to answer it though. Is it a lot of people say when it said at the time that maybe the government should have done a lot more and propped up Holden a lot more, because it keeps us so many local jobs and so much stuff, to the point I even seen a comment somewhere that maybe the government should have bought Holden and sold it off to a private from GM or something just to keep that working. Would that have even been possible?
Josh, you're actually sort of nailing the hammer on the head there. It is true that no car industry anywhere in the world survives without government support in one way or another, whether it's tariffs, whether it's direct funds into it. And this is all getting political. I don't want to get political, but because I'm not a political guy. The thing was that, like I said, the world is changing, and it's also the fact that to compete with the likes of China or Korea or all those things, we had to do things. The government would have to put even more money in. Now, yes, the government could, in my opinion, should have, but people saying, well, there's other things that needed to be helped as well. There's other, it's not just the car industry. The thing about the car industry, what people don't realise is the skills involved. There's, apart from just us guys in design, there's all the engineering, there's the ability to have giant, like we had the biggest presses in the Southern Hemisphere in Adelaide, right? We could press one-piece body side of a ute, a long wheelbase ute. We could press that all in one piece. Nobody else could do that. Why do you think America makes two-piece utes? Because they couldn't be bothered making a press that big. And we did it because we saw that as an intrinsic value that we wanted our ute to be a one-piece body side. We did all that sort of stuff, and now it's all gone. Those presses have gone to China, and half the brain power has either gone to other companies or gone to China or to the US. So,
but the other thing, which people didn't realise, Jeff, there might have been X amount of jobs at Holden, but there was just as many jobs as outside suppliers, the glass suppliers, the wheel suppliers, the foundries, all those other people, wasn't there? The badge makers.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, no, Badge Company was it was a place in Sydney called. I can't even remember their name.
I've got it on the tip of my tongue too.
But they're really, really good, and they would do all sorts of stuff for us. And we kept, I don't know how many staff they would have had. We kept 50 guys there working. The whole industry keeps these people going, and all these little companies contribute to an industry. And it's not just that. It's the guy. It's the cafe down the road that sells lunches to all the people that work there, and all that sort of stuff. And so, it's really sad, and it's the wrong thing. But someone much higher above my pay grade needed to make a better decision than was made. And I think Mary Barra, who is the boss of GM, she made it pretty clear by her actions. She just didn't really care about us. She's got bigger fish to fry, and she's just desperate to keep her company going, as in GM.
GM globally.
And I don't know, I really don't know if I can see a real rosy future for myself. Like the whole electric car thing, I know the electric cars are going to happen, but I don't think battery electric cars are the answer. I think it's got to be a hydrogen fuel cell if it's going to be anything.
I do too, yes.
But by the same token, you shouldn't just throw the baby out of the bathwater and stop making internal combustion engines, because there's still a lot of life in the internal combustion engines, and there's still a lot of advantages.
I think as a country, and I'm not trying to get political either, but as a country that sits, down in the southern hemisphere, alone, water all around us, to not have that level of heavy industry right now in any part of the world, this is probably the heaviest thing we've said on this podcast, but to not have that, I feel like is not a great thing for this country.
No, you're absolutely right.
I was looking at, Again, I got to try and keep this short, but the government should have actually bought Elizabeth, and then you have a look at the association they had with Elon Musk to build that big battery. That place should be turning out electrical components for cars or electric cars or whatever. To me, it's a no-brainer, but nobody had the foresight. It's crazy.
And it's all people get saying, oh, well, the unions killed it. Well, the unions didn't kill it. It was just there was basically unless there was a lot of money injected from the government, the GM were looking for an excuse to say, well, let's get out of here. And unfortunately, that was it. And it's just sad.
I'd like to ask something. Bit change of topic, just quickly, Jeff. Some of the cars that you would have had access to, like at Lang Lang and stuff. What's some cool stuff that you've probably driven around the track? Like, no doubt you do the design, but you want to drive them too.
Well, I can remember when I first started there, and I went down to a test day when we were doing the GTO, and there was a whole lot of American engineers, and we had an F-body Firebird, which had the last of the Firebirds with an LS1 in it, and there was a Corvette, and I drove the Corvette, and I didn't realise that we were speed limited that day, and I went round, absolutely tapped out round the loop, It was the fastest I've ever driven a car. I actually won't say in case someone's listening. But I was going as fast as it would go, and I was really impressed. The thing really tracked straight. You had to put lock on because the way the loop's set up at Lang Lang is 3 lanes, and it's 60 miles an hour. You can, on the low lane, you can take your hands off the wheel and the car will track dead straight. 80 miles an hour for the next lane and 100 miles an hour for the top groove. And I was in the top groove with lock on, gritting my teeth going, yeah! And so that was pretty cool. Drove the last of the unspeed limited VZ. It was the unspeed limited VZs, because after VZ our cars were all speed limited to 250 Ks.
Right.
And I don't know. No, they sort of slipped that in. They never told anybody. But the VZ SS, which the first of the LS cars, second run of the LS cars, but that was the fastest I think Holden actually sold to the public. HSV probably sold faster cars because they were on speed limit. And that was pretty good. And it handled really well, the VZ. And I remember going around the ride and handling track thinking that was pretty cool. I drove a Mustang down there, one of the not the current model, but the model before. What they SN95s were they? I'm not sure. That was pretty good. Didn't have a lot of poke, I didn't think, compared to an LS, because that was the first of that was the last of the not Coyotes, the modular motor.
Yep.
And I wasn't really impressed with the modular motor. I think the Coyote's a lot better. It's
a great motor, yeah.
Yeah. But look, so yeah, there are a couple of things like that, and we always had a little sport. We had, I drove, as I said, the Effigy around there.
Yeah.
I drove a Hurricane. I drove the Hurricane.
Wow.
I drove the GDRX. So that we had a day at Flemington Racecourse, believe it or not, and we had like a little sort of cone set out in the car park down there, and we had all the journalists down, and it was showing all the myriad of show cars we had done over the last X number of years, since 1969, and I got to drive the GDRX, and that was pretty cool. Didn't drive it that fast.
That's really cool.
No, just to drive it. Just to say you've driven it is pretty awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
What another sad lost thing, the GDRX. Just imagine if we could have built that. But
that would have been cool.
Yeah. Like I remember that the when we redid the Hurricane, the guy that built the Hurricane engine for us, he got an original 253, one of the first 4 castings, because the Hurricane was all about trying to showcase the 253 when we first did it. He actually got one of those engines. It was weird. I'm telling you all this because the amount of work that we did was like actually doing the car again. Everything about it was like doing it again. So even though we didn't design it, we were involved with all the stuff.
Because you guys rebuilt the car, right?
We rebuilt full restoration,
Yeah, well, in the end, what we did was we scanned the body and we redid all the body in Alias so that we got it all perfectly beautiful again and actually cast all new body panels for it. So it's pretty much pretty cool, yeah.
I see now in the restoration a lot of cars like there's some part. What's the part for XY and XW on that they don't make now? It's like the side press part or something like that. But anyway, it'd be nice like that. All the companies had these presses to some. They've got to be sitting somewhere. Someone can come out and restamp VL Commodore, or I love VL.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like the bit that I'm thinking of that's the most rarest is an HQ Monaro windscreen mouldings. Yeah, you cannot get those things for love or money, and you need a big press to press the stainless steel to make them. Now, it's all very good for people to say, you can digitally print stuff, and I got involved with a fair bit of that pretty cool stuff in the last project I did at Holden's, but you can't make stainless steel parts with a printer. Hey, your Holden sign's falling off, mate.
I know. That's just like Holden.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not as easy as making a jig and they just press it. I'm sure it's really involved. But
you need some expensive tooling, unfortunately. But,
Can I ask one last question? Oh, not last question, but just another question. How close were we to a VF Monaro? Or VE Monaro even? A
VE Monaro. Very close. We did that show car, the Coupe 60, and
Coupe 60.
Halfway through that, they just said, no. That was halfway through that it got canned. Wow. So we finished the show car, and that's when they took the decision to make it into a race car and put it on those big slicks and make it look like a race car. Didn't have a roll cage in it, but it wasn't looking like a road car anymore. And Pete Hughes designed
there was a concept done that wasn't like a race car.
Yeah, it was going to be, and like there was two versions. There was either going to be it was going to have a B pillar or it was going to be a pillarless. And when it got knocked on the head, we said, well, we're not going to hold back to the show car, so we'll make it pillarless.
Yeah.
So yes, we came pretty close, but we were going to do another Cross 8 for the VE as well, and we were going to do because Hannenberger, who was running the company just at the start of VE, was really, really good and really wanted to make a big splash, and he always was pushing us to develop all these different variants of the cars, and so that was really, really fired us along. And then he left, and a guy named Danny Mooney took over, and it all sort of started to go down the drain. And so things like, we don't have the money to do that. We don't have the money to do that. So, and geez, a VE coupe would have been just awesome. I would love that. I always remember that one that, who was it? Brendan Finlay down. Did you remember that car, Alan?
He built that off a ute platform.
Yeah.
And then, that was a killer looking thing. It still is.
Did it have glass? Did it have all side glass?
In the end, it did. It didn't when we first unveiled it, but in the end, it did.
Yeah. No, he did a great job of that.
Yeah.
He did an awesome job of that. Yeah. So, it would have. There were so many things that we could have spun off that. We were going to do an SUV version of it like Ford did with the Territory, but that wasn't to be either. So
I think I've mentioned to you, and I sound like I'm down in the doldrums tonight. Just all these stories are just where we are. But when I spent a lot of time in the States, as you know, Jeff, and so many people just love that Pontiac, the GTO, the Pontiac. Just can't believe what a great vehicle that was. And then, but they even had them for NASCARs.
For people who might be listening, you might not know that was the Monaro, like the 2001 Monaro, but done as with a Pontiac front end, all changed for the American market.
Yeah.
And they every time I'd go over there, people would just rave about that car. And like I was just saying, they ended up as the NASCAR GM product.
And that was one of the things about all that was. It was kind of set up to fail by GM because what they had, there was a strict rule on fuel consumption for the entire fleet. And GM makes all their money out of selling great big trucks with 454s or whatever. And
And so Duramax diesels.
Diesels. And they use heaps and heaps of juice. And so they didn't want to actually be selling another sedan-sized car that was going to lower their corporate fuel consumption level. And we said, well, just take the V6. And they say, the V6, no, well, why would you do a V6? If you're going to do it, you've got to do the V8. And we can say, the V6 is pretty good too.
Yeah, absolutely.
V6 Mustangs are very popular in America.
Yeah. It was, so I kind of think they sort of set us up to fail a little bit on that. I really do. And they just didn't want the competition from another GM branch, Yeah. They wanted to sell as many Camaros and Corvettes as they could. They didn't.
Yeah. I love the fact that some of the American guys I've seen online have switched them to Monaros and stuff now. Like those front ends put Holden badges on them. And even with the VF, the Chevy SS, I watched a lot of videos of reviews of that car when it came out over there, and they were like, what a machine.
They really like it because it was one of the things about it is that a lot of them said it wasn't aggressive enough looking. But that's also part of its charm, that it blended in. But it's like a wolf. It's a classic wolf in sheep's clothing. The thing's a rocket ship, and it's fun to drive. It steers and stops and does all that really, really well. And you can make them look pretty angry as well. So
absolutely.
I just think they thought, these bloody Australians with these cars, we don't want that. We don't want them telling us what to do. That's kind of what I think.
Would you stop making great cars with our LS engines?
Exactly.
Look, I'm not knocking the cars they made because there's nothing wrong with a Camaro. There's nothing wrong with a Corvette. And, those Cadillacs are awesome, the CDSVs and all those sort of things.
Yeah.
So I just reckon there was room for everybody to sell a product. So what we were selling was something that was almost as good as a Cadillac. Maybe not almost as good as a Cadillac, but certainly performed as well as a Cadillac for half the money. Now, I guess they sort of thought, hey, wait a minute. That's not a good idea.
I remember at the time feeling a bit upset, though, at the fact that the American Chevy SS had come out with the LS2 straight off the bat, whereas our one came out with the 6-litre.
Well, that's because they said, what's HSV selling? And I wasn't putting the LS2s in the HSVs at that stage. So we'll have that then. Right. So that was one of the reasons why I bought a VF2 was, to me, that was an HSV for Holden money because it had an LS3 in it because, the LS3 was the bread and butter car until the LSA came along.
Yeah.
One of the problems was for HSV, I believe, and the reason why they went to LSA was there was a Euro 6 emissions coming along, and the modifications they'd done on the LS3 meant that it wasn't going to comply.
Okay.
And that's why LSA would comply, but LS3 wouldn't. And so our LS3 didn't make as much kilowatts as the HSV one. I think it was to do with the Euro 5 or Euro 6 compliance. But hey, it's pretty easy to put an exhaust and get it retuned.
That's exactly right.
So as sad as it all is, mate, the one thing, I think we grew up in a really good era, and you look at we even go back to, EHs and then the Monaros and Tiranas. So we've just got some great vehicles and great memories. And just look now, I bet we wish we all had a garage full of 350 Monaros. XU1 Tiranas.
Mate, an 809X is actually what I always liked. 809X, HQ Monaro. Yeah. I'd like an XA Superbird Coupe.
Yeah.
Proper GT, and I'd like a 340 Charger E55. Yeah. That would be the things I'd like.
Lately I've had vision of going to monster trucks with my dad and stuff as a kid, and them cars get a run over.
Yeah.
That's what they did. Yeah. Don't do it.
Back then you're like, now you're like, no.
I mean, just imagine if you had one of those Falcons, one of those Charger, one of those Monaros. They're all like 5-figure cars now, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't not buy them. Not a good one, not a drivable one, for less than $100,000.
No. So, all right, mate. So look, I absolutely really thank you for your input, and I knew it'd be a great interview. And
thanks. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
No, thanks
for coming on, Jeff.
And I'm in awe of what you've done in your career. Actually, it's been awesome. But I'm looking forward to that Mustang, and I'm going to hammer you, believe me.
Yeah, no, please do. Please do. I will need to keep my mind absolutely on the job. So thanks. No, thanks for inviting me on, guys. I've had a ball. It's nice to talk about stuff that I love, and I do love it.
Yeah.
So, and talk with like-minded dudes like yourself who get it. So it's good. Thank you very much.
I mean, I loved going to motor shows back in the days in Sydney and stuff, and looking at I remember seeing the SSX there and all the cars, and I'd anticipate the fact of going to the Sydney Motor Show, because that was my local one, obviously, and walk around looking at the fine details of the new Holden concept car or this. And my kids aren't going to get to witness that. We're just going to shove whatever brand.
Yeah. But look, the only thing I'd say is my kids, who are both boys, don't even care.
Yeah.
My kids, who everyone says, I bet your boys are just absolute car nuts. And I said, they haven't even got their licenses. They're 19 and 20. They haven't even got their licenses.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So, look, the world changes. That's all you can take from it. But there are people out there, there are young guys out there that want to keep it alive. The dream alive. So that's good.
Yeah.
And so more power to them, I say.
Good on you, mate.
Perfect.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much, guys. Take it easy.
Street Machine. If you don't read Street Machine, follow their YouTube channel or visit their website for great content. What are you doing with your life? Nothing. That's what you're doing. For all the latest on all things Street Machine, visit your local newsagent, buy a magazine subscription on their website now. They got all sorts of mad stuff. Turbo taxis, LS-powered MX-5s, and the best street machines Australia has to offer. Do it now.
All right, that's another episode in the bag, mate.
Yeah, wow.
How good was that? That's crazy. I have hairs on my arms just standing up some of those stories.
Yeah, look, and what's really good about that, and what I knew Jeff would cover, was that there's so many interesting stories there. Like, how many people would have really known that Australia was so heavily involved with the Camaro?
Yeah.
And it's such a popular car around the world. Yeah. And we basically designed the whole car and on our platform.
Absolutely, and I know Jeff did touch on that, the fact that it wasn't a secret, and probably a lot of car guys who read a lot of car magazines or read stuff online at the time knew that was on a Zeta platform. But if you go and ask, say, if I ask my wife, she watches Transformers and stuff with the kids, or she watches it as well, she probably would know if I said that Bumblebee car, you see that car there? That was designed in Australia. You know, like, that's a really cool thing that that probably the mainstream public don't know.
Yeah.
And what about some other stories, like some crazy stuff? We even, for once on this, we're full of crazy lunatics on it usually, but we even got a bit political. Look at that.
Yeah. Well, it is, as we said there, without sort of going over it all, J-Vance, it's just such a sad story that we don't have the car industry anymore. And like Holden I can't believe you just talk to people that aren't even car people, and everybody knows an EH Holden or a Monaro. It's just part of the Australian fabric. So it's
to quote Jeff, quote unquote, it was tragic.
Yeah, tragic.
Absolutely, but it is what it is. And
we've got the memories. I've got an EH, you've got a VL, so
I've got two, but don't tell everybody.
It's all good.
All right, mate. Well, don't forget rockynats.com.au. Go there if you want to come to Rocky Nats, because if you don't go on there and get what you need, we won't see you there. We want to see you there, 100%.
Correct. All right, mate.
It's going to be awesome. All right, that's it for the end of the show. Webbs, that was a cracking episode, mate. You're a legend.
Right. Yeah, good on you. See you, mate.
All right, mate. I'll see you next week.